As a musician, sooner or later you're going to come across chord symbols, whether that's in a real book or as part of a big band, or even a guitarist quickly telling you the chords in a pop song before you've got to take a solo. And even if you can already read music, this can often seem like a foreign language or a complicated code to try and decipher. But today, we're going to go through what all of those chord symbols mean, from simple triads all the way through to more complicated jazz chords. So with a bit of practice, you can immediately know what notes are in any chord. Now for all of this, the easiest way to do it is relate it back to the major scale. That way, you don't need to worry about complicated intervals and major and minor thirds and all that sort of thing. You can just think of one scale and go from there. Let's start with 3-note chords, or triads. And the simplest chord symbol there is just a single letter. Let's say C. Now that letter is the root of our chord, which means it's the first note in it, and also the major scale we're going to be thinking of. If there's nothing written after it, just a single letter, that means it's a major chord. So thinking back to our major scale, we're going to take the first, third, and fifth notes. In this case, C, E, and G. And that's it. That's our major chord. And the other common 3-note chord is a minor chord. And frustratingly, there are 2 different ways that we can see this written in a chord symbol. It might be a little M or it might be a dash. Either way, for C minor, C is still going to be our root. We still want the third and the fifth notes of that scale. But because it's minor, we want to flatten the third. So in this case, that E is going to become an E flat. So we have C, E flat, and G. Whatever the letter is, it's the same idea, we just change which major scale we're thinking of. Now the next most common things you might see in a chord symbol are 7 or maj 7. And these both involve adding a 4th note into the chord. And because of that, I'd really encourage you to treat them as a separate piece of information, unrelated to what else is in that chord symbol. So if we take our C chord from before and turn it into a C maj 7, well, C will still be our root. We still want the thirds and fifth. But the maj 7 means we're going to take the 7th note from the major scale, in this case B. So we have C, E, G, and B. But if rather than C maj 7, it was C minor maj 7, well, once again, C would be our root. It's minor, so we want an E flat. Still have G. And because it's still a maj 7, we'd still put in that B. But what if it just says 7 rather than maj 7? Well, it's the same idea, but we want to flatten the 7th note of the scale. So a C7 would have C, E, G, and then rather than a B, it would be a B flat. And a C minor 7 would be C, E flat because it's minor, G, and then because it's just 7, it would be a B flat again. Less commonly, you might see a 6 in the chord symbol rather than a 7, and that just means we add in the 6th note of the major scale. So a C minor 6, well, C minor, so C, E flat, and G, but also an A because that's the 6th note of the major scale. Once you've got to grips with that, to be honest, pretty much everything else they can write in the chord symbol is surprisingly simple. To add more notes into the chord, they might put in a 9, 11, or a 13 into the chord symbol. And these are called extensions. But to be honest, you can kind of treat them the same way you would 7 or maj 7. So a C maj 13 would still be C, E, G, and B. And a C minor 9 would still have C, E flat, G, and B flat. They just both include notes beyond that. A 9 adds in the 9th note of the major scale, so in this case D. 11 adds in the 9th and the 11th, so D and F. And 13 adds in the 9th, 11th, and 13th, so D, F, and A. Basically, the number in the chord symbol is the highest unaltered extension in the chord, and the chord includes all the unaltered extensions below that. So a C maj 13 would have C as the root, E, G, B, D as the 9th, F as the 11th, and an A as the 13th. And a C minor 11 would have C as the root again, E flat because it's minor, G, B flat, D as the 9th, and an F as the 11th. But you've probably seen scarier chord symbols than that at some point, perhaps something a little like this. And while all those alterations do look quite frightening, they are surprisingly simple to work out. Basically, if there are any notes in the chord that don't follow the rules we've gone through so far, they'll write those in the chord symbol. A relatively common one being C minor 7 flat 5. Well, C minor 7 would be C, E flat, G, and B flat. But that flat 5 means we take the 5th, so G, and lower it by a semitone, so the G becomes a G flat, giving us C, E flat, G flat, and B flat. Or if we go for something scarier, like C7, flat 9, sharp 11, flat 13, well, C7 would still give us C as our root, E, G, and B flat. And D would be our 9th, but we want to flatten it, so D flat. F would be the 11th, but we want to sharpen it, so F sharp. A would be our 13th, but we want a flat 13, so A flat, giving us C, E, G, B flat, D flat, F sharp, and A flat. A lot of notes for sure, but relatively okay to work out if you give yourself the time.
Oh, they literally tell you what's in the chord.
Now, two of the less commonly seen chord symbols are for diminished and augmented chords, and these are 3-note chords similar to the triads we looked at earlier. Now, diminished chords are normally written as dim or a small circle, and they've just got a flat third and a flat 5th. So a C dim would be C, E flat, and G flat. And augmented chords, well, they're written as aug, surprise, surprise, and they're basically a major chord with a sharpened 5th. So C aug would be C, E, and then the G becomes a G sharp. Now, so far, every chord we've looked at has had the root, 3rd, and 5th as its base. But that changes slightly if we have the word sus in the chord symbol. And sus means we replace the 3rd with either the 2nd note of the major scale or the 4th note of the major scale. Sometimes it will specify which, so like C sus 2, well, sus 2 means it's the 2nd note that we're going to use rather than the 3rd, so C, D, and G. But if it doesn't specify, it means the 4th. So a C7 sus would be C as the root, the 4th replaces the 3rd, so F next, then G as normal, and B flat because it's a 7. It doesn't change anything else, so if there are any extensions written into the chord symbol or anything like that, all the rules we've gone through so far still apply. And the final thing is slash chords. And these are, surprise, surprise, chords with a slash in the chord symbol. I know, mind blown! Once again, while complicated looking, these are actually surprisingly simple. Basically, the part before the slash is the main chord, and the note after the slash is the note in the bass. So a C minor 7 slash F would be, well, C minor 7 on top, so C, E flat, G, and B flat, with an F in the bass. And sometimes these are used to make complicated harmony a bit easier to read as a musician. Sometimes it's used to specify certain voicings, but whatever the context, it's the same theory. And that's it. Now, I know that was a hell of a lot of information to go through in just a few minutes, so I've put in chapter markers, and if you want to go back and rewatch any parts of this video, absolutely go for it. But the best way to get really used to this is find a lead sheet or anything with a whole load of chord symbols on it, and just practice working out what notes are in which chord. Understanding the theory is great, but being able to look at a chord symbol and immediately know what notes are in that chord? Well, that's when we can start making music. And check out this video to find out how we can go from just knowing chord tones or arpeggios into making pretty mega solos out of them.